Welcome to The FlowDown, the new podcast series talking service operations in the real world.
It just wouldn't load for like 30 seconds. And at that time, right, I was like, this is outrageous.
We bring together senior leaders, product experts, and ServiceNow clients to do something a little different. Why is the first time I'm finding out about this issue on Twitter?
Yeah,
Yeah. We get behind the marketing spiel and sales patter, just straight talking advice, opinions, and experiences from those in the know.
In a lot of organizations, if SAP goes down, the world loses its mind.
Chris, Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Hello, mate. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Very good, very good.
Good. So, Chris, you lead service operations for UK and I, right? Tell us a bit more about what you do.
As you said, Jack, so I'm responsible for service operations within the UK and I. What that means from a solution perspective within the business is that the two solutions of ITSM and ITOM. I'm responsible for all of the orchestration and the inspiring of the sales teams around that particular proposition into our client. So it's a relatively big business and growing business, and that's wholly reflective of the work that we're doing with all of our customers, really, and partners such as yourself. So yeah,
absolutely. And Mr. Morgan Lee, who I'm going to call MML because it would be strange to call you anything else. But I mean, you're here in the context both today of a consultant at Unifii, obviously, but also we're going to draw on some of your past experience on the customer side. So tell us a bit more about that.
So I've been with the company for about a year, just over a year now, managing consultants, head up solution architecture as well. But in previous lives, have sort of always been sort of solution enterprise architect from an ITSM, service operations, service impact management, etc., and sort of that general tool set. For the past 20 odd years or more than I can care to remember.
You were telling us that you were only 17 though. So
indeed, this is how I age in this industry.
So service operations, obviously all of us are well deep into that world, but Chris, from a ServiceNow perspective, tell us, what is service operations?
So typically organizations will have had two silos, so service management and operations management, and service operations is when we bring those two together to deliver a holistic service across the organization. And what we find is that when companies do that, they're able to, manage costs more effectively, mitigate more risk, and, deliver a greater customer experience.
So it's a concept, right? Yeah. It's not a product. It's not a new thing that ServiceNow are bringing to the table. It's been around for a long time.
No, exactly that. Yeah, it's a methodology. We don't have there's not a product that delivers that. As you rightly said, it's a combination of those things and the layering of the cultural change, the services, etc., that deliver that, which ultimately delivers those outcomes. Yeah.
And obviously, there's nods to service operations in the platform. One of the most recent examples of that is obviously the service operations workspace. So I think when a lot of people hear service operations, that's naturally what they think. MML, it's not the workspace itself, though, that we're talking about today, right? It's everything behind it that is where the power really comes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the word, it's the power piece as well. And service operations as an umbrella, I think, starts to build upon everything that makes up the outcomes that you need. And for me, it's about context. And the most important thing service operations can do is bring context to alerts, events, to data, to all that in one place, so that sort of companies and organizations understand exactly where to focus their efforts as well.
I think it's a massive 1 + 1 = 3 type of story, right? It is. And I mean, I've had some examples in past lives where I've had that context and where I've been in organizations that are able to join those dots. It's not just the technical capabilities or the ability to solve incidents, issues, whatever they are, faster. It's the ability to manage expectations better. It's the ability, for me, it was a mindset piece of going, actually, when that piece of infrastructure goes down, it's not just the server going down, it's affecting that service. And so those customers who we need to warn about X not being able to work or temporarily not working for them. Yeah. So I think there's a massive mindset piece as well as the technical stuff that sits behind the scenes, right? Yeah.
And to be honest with you, Jack, I think you can sometimes overcomplicate it in many respects, and actually it's really very simple, really, in terms of the bringing of that together. The technology organization is responsible for delivering IT to the organization and to its partners and customers and so on. Why would you want to do that in silos? If you think about it just very simply, is there any benefit to a number of different silos or teams working without the ability to see or collaborate with what each of the other teams is doing.
And again, it's a visibility piece. So, if you've got, if you're a large company, a large organization, you're running multiple services, how do you know what's going on and when? And that's the piece as well, because then other people will be asking, okay, where's my service? Where's this? What's happening with this? And it's given, certainly as you start to go up to, CTOs, CIOs, IT directors, etc., it's given them the visibility to be able to say, yep, we know there's a problem here, we're working on it, etc. So it's bringing all that together and sort of wrapping it under that umbrella of service operations.
And it's an interesting point. So why would you say that's not more obvious to people and stakeholders? Because what you said there makes perfect logical sense. So where do we get stuck?
I think where we get stuck is there is this disjointed approach at the moment, and teams are very siloed in terms of what they're doing, and often as well, you don't go into many organisations that have a really good handle on exactly what makes up their entire service stack as well, because a lot of the groundwork hasn't been done. So typically, if you can get someone to sit down and draw out what their services are, you're on a real winner. You start from that point of view, and then you can start to bake in back into the organisation to make sure that those teams are working together. I mean, typically, we're working with many customers where they'll have a cloud team, but the cloud teams even work independently of each other and don't know what each other's doing. And so actually then to get that, to get the visibility above that, it's even more difficult. And you mentioned about the processes behind it as well. I think that's a real key piece as well. It's making sure that once you've got the technology is the one part, but once you've got that in place and you've got the right processes around it, that's where it all starts to come together. But it is, at the moment, I think a lot of places are disjointed. And hopefully trying to bring in this sort of umbrella of the service operations starts to move a lot of that disjointedness away and start to get a bit more aligned and a bit more collaborative. And that's where we can start to see some of the benefits that we want to get to.
I think it's probably really important to say that it is obvious, right? And I think everyone recognizes that. And I see service operations much more as an opportunity for organizations to take a step back and look at the strategies they've got on both the service and the operations side, and to take that opportunity to go, how do we bring these two strategies together? And that's both at a tactical level in terms of processes and visibility of actual different parts of the organization, different parts of the infrastructure. That's brought together in things like service operations workspace, which is why I think it's so powerful. But it's also that it's a relationships piece. You say a lot that service operations fundamentally is just about collaboration. And we talk a lot about silos. I don't think anyone wants to have silos in their organization. But I think, as I say, this is nothing brand new and innovative we're talking about here. It's just a reminder that getting those foundations right allows you then to take advantage of more and more of the exciting stuff that we're seeing at the moment with AI and with automation and everything else that's coming down the line.
Yeah. And I think, the business benefits and the business outcomes that organizations can drive from it are relatively undeniable, right? Because when you start to break down those silos and work together more collaboratively, bring context to all the things that you're doing, you are going to have a more productive, more efficient organization. That's without doubt, right? Then how do we then articulate that back into the overall business purpose that organization has, whether it is to deliver a better service, whether it's to drive growth, reduce costs, whatever it be. It's those things that we probably need to do a better job at sometimes at articulating to key stakeholders in terms of what they are, because I think that's one of the things that we see on a day-to-day basis, really, in terms of the engagements that we have with our clients, is that we just have to be better at surfacing what those bigger outcomes are, because I think sometimes service operations gets lost as a word of it's just a bit techie, it's what the techie guys do, when actually it really isn't. And I think often we use the word transformation for everything, right? And everything's transformative. But actually, truly in an organization, this is one of those areas that does transform the way that the organization works, right? And the results that they can drive. And I know, MML, you've had some good examples in terms of where you've seen that, some real examples of where businesses have driven that yourself, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the past where we've worked and we've had some customers, and we've had, a simple, very ticket being raised for box A that's broken. Typically before we started to provide that context, it was like, okay, so what? Who cares? And what does box A do? Absolutely no idea what it affects, who it affects, what it means. When we started to build a bit more of that context around, actually we started to become a lot more focused. So people weren't running around like headless chickens going, oh, I've got an alert. I think it's that team. I'll go over there. And then it gets bounced around. And actually, it just takes forever then to get fixed. But getting that context behind it, starting to align these teams, starting to say, actually, yeah, but if that breaks, this thing over here is affected. You start to build that chain, and then that way it goes to the right team. So you start to, as a result, you start to get quicker resolutions. You start to get things better, fixed faster as well. And that's sort of the intangibles as well that come along that drive those efficiencies you mentioned earlier. And I think that's as a result as well. And when you don't have that, I've had experiences where we've had a security alert on a server, and it's taken 4 weeks to work out who owned the server. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's a real world example, you know what I mean? And in other places, once you get over that, actually it's done straight away. That's the end goal for this. This hasn't changed for years. This is it's what organizations need from a business context point of view, is how my services doing.
And it always fascinates me really when you give those real life examples like that, and they're so simple and they can make such a big change very quickly. And the impact that has then to the broader organization, not just in the context of this actually, because it is important in terms of what they do with that, but actually the whole of their digital journey, their digital transformation activity and strategy that they may have. It just brings a whole new level of confidence to it. And actually people can then look at, innovation. They can actually see, the sense of the possibility in some of that. And so I think this is why, obviously I'm a big advocate of it, given the role that I do. But it is actually, it does change organizations, right? Beyond, the platform aspect of it that we speak about.
For sure. And I guess to that point, we said we'd do this differently, right? We said we'd make this real. So give me an example of service operations and the effect it can have if done well or if done badly, your choice in an organization, and the effect on you as a consumer of a service or a product.
One of the things that, as life progresses, our expectations around the way in which digital services is delivered, also evolves as well. I had a situation at the weekend where, so I think the football was on, and it just wouldn't load for like 30 seconds. And but at that time, right, I was like, this is outrageous. Why? This is starting to ruin my day, right? We're like 15 seconds into me not being able to kind of, get an internet connection. But that's the point, isn't it? In some respects, that our expectation is that these services that we consume are available when we need them to be at that point in time, not 15 seconds later in that scenario. But there could be other situations where, me waiting 5 minutes to retrieve a document or to access an application I need in order to, manage a customer, that becomes unacceptable, right? And then that then manifests itself into many more different ways, which it shouldn't do, which then can have an impact in terms of the company's performance, the way in which we deal with our customers. Yeah. And that is the knock-on effect of not doing these things right. How much we're willing to accept of that is being constantly diminished, right? And there'll be a time in the future, probably not that too far away, where no outage is acceptable.
Yeah. And to a customer without context, no outage is acceptable, right?
Exactly that. So I think, and this is where we talk about, the methodology of service operations, the opportunity of service operations in an organization is about, diminishing all of the incidents, the issues, the problems, the outages, all of those kind of things that can happen in order to deliver a service that just works right. And then to answer your question, Jack, in terms of what happens when it works, well, people just consume. Nothing happens.
Nobody notices.
I turn it on, it works. Of course,
that's the irony of it, I think. Yeah. And your example, I think, is a really good one of something going wrong on the operational side, and then that service element almost being missing.
Yeah.
And so you've got one side of that service operations concept methodology or whatever, something on one side of it has gone wrong, and there's nothing on the other side to catch it. So that combination of those two things, clearly behind the scenes at this organization that look after this particular product, something wasn't working there.
Yeah.
So MMO, have you got an example in your personal life of anything either similar or different that you think is
and
you've seen done really well?
Yeah, and it comes back to context for me as well. And just touch on a very quick point. There's a very good point you made earlier as well about everything we expect in our daily lives now. People are taken back into organizations going, well, why doesn't that work now?
Yeah,
you can go and you can get things that literally the snap of your fingers outside in the outside world. Why isn't that working as well? I think from my point of view as well, context is a really big thing, as I mentioned before. And at the weekend, I had a problem with the TV. And so I logged on the app And there was a message saying, yeah, we've got problems in your area. We're looking to fix it. We'll give you an update. And as a consumer, it was like, okay, cool. It's a pain that it's not working, but do you know what? Someone's got it. I know they've provided me the information.
So true.
Not a problem. I'll leave it, lo and behold, an hour later, yeah, she'll be all right, fixed now, do this, do that. It worked.
And it could have been exactly the same issue as Chris was having,
Absolutely.
right? But because he didn't have that context.
Because I knew, I was far more comfortable. And I think that's right in organizations as well. If you've got, if there's a problem with one of the systems that provides the portal, but you put something out to say, we know there's a problem, we're working on it, we're doing that, users are going to be far more, I think, forgiving and understanding than if you don't give them anything. And then they're just like, why isn't this working?
Well, even in that scenario there, maybe it's an opportunity for them through that insight just to go and do something else, right? So actually from just a general productivity perspective, that insight and context actually just allows you to then to reprioritize what it is that you're going to do, as opposed to standing around just switching it on and off or whatever it be in that situation.
Absolutely. And, you want to empower people as well. And then you start to get better service levels and you get better empathy almost, that type of thing as well. And those, again, are all them intangible things that come from this.
One of the things that we spoke about before was, and I'm keen to get your view on this, is we kind of touched upon it slightly earlier, but in terms of from an exec perspective, what is it that you feel that we have to articulate to execs, either in a business case or internal technology stakeholders into CXOs, CTOs? What are the key points for them that they really care about in connection to this?
Yeah, for me, I think the biggest one is visibility. So knowing, if you're an IT director and you're responsible for 20 services that you provide to customers, to internal customers, to other parts of the business, whatever it be, but you want to be able to have a point in time, a real-time view of how all of that is performing for you. So are they all green? Have we got some of them red? And if we have got some red, what are we doing about it? Have we got someone on it? Do we know what the problem is? Is it with someone to fix? Because
who owns it? Do I need to catch them in the
It's that
corridor?
ownership piece is a massive one. Because that IT director, the minute something generally breaks, in a lot of organizations, if SAP goes down, the world loses its mind. Because it's intrinsic in everything. And so they're going to get a phone call from their bosses and their boss's boss going, right, what are you doing? And if they don't have an answer, you don't know what you're not sort of in charge of your own area. And so I think visibility is a huge thing, and that's a big sell. And when we started to do that with the previous IT director we just built a very simple service map, and that visualization, he was a lot more comfortable with that then, because it was like, there's a box that's gone red. Now, there's a multitude of stuff that happens behind it. But from an IT director point of view, to be able to ascertain, here's my services, here's how they're doing, they're all up, they're all available. If I've got a problem, I know where it is, who owns it.
So he might not know what red means in that incident, but he knows that something's going on.
But he knows, and he can point to someone and go, yes, Mr. CEO, actually, we're on it, we know what the problem is, we're fixing it, I'll give you a shout in an hour, and things like that.
I think you're right, and I had a really good example recently of a client of mine, a CEO, and she asked a very simple question, which was, why is the first time I'm finding out about this issue on Twitter? In her example. And that really frustrated her, naturally so. So if that visibility in that context was there, not only would she have known that something was going wrong, she'd have been able to action something before it escalated to the point where it was all over Twitter. And don't get me wrong, Twitter/X is fast. Social media is fast, but we know about this stuff internally. Someone does.
Absolutely.
Ahead of those things happening and the consequences on customers, which drives them to shout about things on social media. Okay, so I'm going to move us on. And we're going to talk a little bit about why we should care. Why, as an organization, as a client of the platform, as a senior leader within a business, should care about service operations. We've talked a little bit about it, but I think there's probably a few other reasons that we can explore. So the first one for me is that the platform is moving in that direction, right? From a vendor perspective, the platform is being built around service operations. You're seeing the likes of Agent Workspace being deprecated, Service Operations Workspace taking its place. You're seeing all new products being built in a CSDM-aligned way, and all existing products being kind of rebuilt to align to CSDM. So from a technical and an architectural perspective, the platform is moving. And if you don't move with it, either directly aligning to it or moving in the same direction, you're going to be moving or flatlining, and the platform's going to be gradually more and more moving away from you, right? So MML, from your perspective, given you kind of head up this area, tell us a bit more about that and the kind of impact it can have.
Yeah, and I suppose there's two things. So the key goal really is industrialization. So once you've got your service operations in place, for example, and you've got your, you've mapped out a couple of your services, so you're all over exactly what's happening with these particular services. When new things come into the business and new technologies and new different areas, etc., you've got a framework to plug it in then. And then you get into much more plug and play, and you're not reinventing the wheel every time, so you know it works. So not sort of following that, and this is where the platform's helping massively at the moment, is because things like the integrations are now, to use another acronym, apologies, I'm the techie in the room, but the CSDM, yeah? But, so that's a framework within a database to give it a high level, but it allows you to, hierarchically set out your services. It's generally all it is. So the integrations then, when you start to integrate into the platform, if they align to those areas, it makes life a hell of a lot easier. And so the platform is, as you said, is going that way. A lot of the integrations now are becoming much more CSDM aligned.
So what does that mean? What does alignment mean?
So alignment means,
in the
so
real
if
world?
you imagine when you're trying to plug A into B, you've then got to tell everything in A, these 10 things to go where it needs to go to in B. If you are already aligned, you don't have to tell it where to put it. You basically just say, go there and put it in there. And that's it. So your time for solutionizing and for the technical aspects just drops dramatically because you don't have to think in the back of your head, point one's got to go into A and point two's got to go into D.
You're not doing all of that redirection.
You're not doing that, and you're not doing rework all the time as well. And again, it's that industrialization. If you've got a platform that you can have industrialized processes and integrations and coder connections, etc., and you can have all that built for you, it just makes the plug and play bit a lot easier. So it's really important that put the work in, get the foundations in, come up with your framework, but then work with the platform as well and keep that alignment as you start moving
We'll talk a bit more about the specifics, I think, of how we do that in a moment. But Chris, from your perspective as well, service operations isn't just foundations, right? It's not just CSDM. CSDM is a part of service operations, and it's a foundation that enables the power of service operations to really come through. But from a platform perspective, if you're not aligning in the way that we're talking about, and MML has just described, your ability to then take advantage of new features, to wrap AI around everything, and to kind of automate processes that you want to, is hampered also, right? Or potentially so.
Yeah, I think in somewhat we're kind of talking about two different things possibly. Service operations is certainly a capability that you can deliver from the platform, and a very powerful one that has manifestations beyond just service operations in terms of the way that it interoperates then with things like asset management and other related products and so on. And I think that, as you said, and not to turn this into a sales pitch about ServiceNow, because it's not, because it's just simple reality in that it is, as MML was saying, right, the power of that platform is so powerful, and the opportunity that gives you in service operations clearly, but actually beyond that as well. And actually the evolution of service ops in terms of then actually when you do start to add things like asset management and SPM and stuff like that on top of it, then that actually becomes the opportunity beyond the organization into your employee, into your customer, et cetera, to do then custom development in terms of whilst pulling the power of one data set, one security set, all those kind of things. That's where it comes into its own really. But equally, I mean, we find this as well, that customers get obsessed about having, the CMDB. It's got to be absolutely perfect. We can't do this until it's, and that's just not the case, right? There's a lot of headway you can make, and then evolve and mature that as you go along, right? And I know, MML, you've got some good examples of where customers have perhaps got stuck on that in the wrong way or kind of looked at it in the wrong way. But absolutely, it is a reminder that, nothing's ever really perfect, and there are many outcomes that you can drive from actually just getting on with it, actually.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to fall into that, which we see a lot with clients. It doesn't have to fall into that too big, too complicated file every year.
Yeah.
I think the really interesting part about this year and about service operations, and the reason it's more front and center than it's ever been, is the pace at which the platform is now moving in that direction. I think I mentioned earlier, a good example of that is the deprecation of agent workspace and the front and center view for agents now being service operations workspace. But for me, that is just a workspace. It's powerful, but it's just a workspace. What it says to me is that it's a real sign of intent that ServiceNow as a platform is moving in that direction. The best time to to realign, if you like, was 2 years ago. The next best time really is now. Okay, so Chris, you use the platform yourself. Fundamentally, you're drinking your own champagne. How do you guys use it? What kind of results have you had, if any?
Yeah, I mean, as you can expect, we use our platform end to end, and all of the aspects that sit within that. And now our internal IT, which is referred to as digital technology, have done or do an amazing job at delivering, the services out to, all of the ServiceNow employees globally.
It'd be bad marketing if you didn't, right?
Yeah, it would be a little bit. Yeah. Well, mine being the account manager for ServiceNow, selling ServiceNow. But anyway, yeah, I mean, there's some great examples of that. But I mean, one of the things you have to remember is, though, that this has been within our DNA from day dot, right? So it's very easy to talk about the brilliant job that we do at delivering, IT services to our internal business, right? Because we've been the innovator of that, and we've been on that journey from the very start. So there are some great slides. There's a great presentation on the Now piece, which talks about how, as our employee set has grown from like 4,000 to 25,000.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah, we've the support team that supports that has gone from only 11 to 40 people, right? So we have 40 people that run the whole of our 25,000 employee base, right? And we can only do that through service operations, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It's that preventative, predictive aspect of delivering the service, right? And of course, like every organisation, things occasionally go wrong, but we're very, very good at making sure that the majority of the changes and updates and the things that happen in the background are very preventative in terms of the way that we deliver that. So internally it's a great use case, but it's a nirvana situation, I think, for most organisations, and I think you can take those learnings in that template as a place to aim towards.
Well, exactly. Taking the learnings from how you guys use the platform internally.
Yeah.
And that's built into the product clearly, but is massively helpful from our side, on the consultancy side, where we're working with clients to take some of those principles, and regardless of whether or not you can go all the way back to the start and kind of implement from day one, we know that those learnings are still massively relevant to organizations today that are looking to do this now. MML from a client side, putting your customer hat back on, what is the opportunity cost of not focusing on service operations, and what you're missing out on?
I mean, ultimately, it's that lack of prioritization, and it's that lack of focus, and it's that lack of
and that context.
Go fix that. It's that context bit as well, and the broken record type thing. But that it is one of the the big pillars of this, I think. I mean, not having it. I gave the example before where we had a security alert with a previous life, and it took 4 weeks to work out who the person was. Now, albeit, in the end, it was just a server that sat in a room somewhere that should have been decommissioned years ago. So actually, operationally, wasn't a problem. However, for 4 weeks, no one really knew. That could have quite happily been one of the central servers that sits within the heart of a network, and no one knew what the problem was. And that's, for me, that's one of the pieces. The other piece as well, I think, is if you don't do this and provide context and provide the alignment, as I was speaking to before, I think, the amount of dissatisfaction from employees starts to increase. So we had one where a CEO had a problem with their laptop. Now, people have problems with laptops, that's fine. And, rang the desk to say, I've got a problem with my laptop. And the first thing the desk taken said, do me a favour, can you turn it upside down and unplug it all and tell me the serial number? To the CEO of a company. Now, there's no way that should be happening. You know what I mean? And so obviously he was just like, okay, fair enough. And he sort of humoured it, if you like. But if you did that like on a wide scale, if everyone in ServiceNow, every time you had a problem with your laptop, for example, rang up and they were like, oh yeah, can you go and find that really tiny little label at the back, please, and tell me what it is, and then it just wouldn't, and you'd be like, I'm not going to do this. And so that then drives people away from using things like self-service. They're like, well, why am I going to go on the portal when it doesn't have my information, etc. And it starts to really, I think, impact then employees. And that's that employee satisfaction piece. Everyone's now expecting what happens in the outside world to happen in work. Especially around Christmas time, everyone goes on Amazon, does a few clicks, it turns up, it's Christmas shopping done, brilliant. Why, if I want to purchase a new server, does it take 4 weeks and go through 6 systems? And that's the I think the difference that people are going to start to address.
Absolutely.
And so I think certainly around companies and them not doing it, you're just becoming inefficient by default.
organizations over time will become less competitive, right? They'll incur more cost, they'll carry more risk. That'll have an impact in terms of, from an investment perspective, all these kind of things do have a material impact and will actually only compound itself over the coming years, right, as that expectation grows. So I think you kind of have to do it now, really. Waiting, 3-5 years, you are going to miss the boat, right, because there will be competitors within all industries, right? Because this is industry agnostic, right? Absolutely. This is not about big finance organizations or large public sector. This is every organization of every organizational type has to do this in order to remain efficient within their own industry. That's without doubt.
Absolutely. And while I'll speak on your behalf here, Chris, this isn't a vendor and this isn't us as part of the ServiceNow community trying to force customers down a particular path. If you don't, and I'm going to speak bluntly here, if you don't adopt the service operations way of working, if you don't invest in that methodology, it's an expensive ticketing tool. You're paying for a platform that you're not fully utilizing, and the platform is built for so much more than the service or the operations sides alone. Yeah. Fair?
Yeah. Well, the use cases for ServiceNow is from a platform perspective, right? In terms of you'll generate far more value from all of the aspects of the platform. Really, what as an organization are you doing if you aren't then deploying these types of things? Even simple things like virtual agent, right? You can deflect 50% of all your incidents coming in by using virtual agent in that kind of shift left kind of position or automation, using automation to kind of resolve issues.
I disagree with you there, because our most recent virtual agent project, we deflected 98% of tickets in the first 3 months. But no, absolutely, and I think that's a really important point. So MML, let's get real. We talked a lot about adopting, we talked a lot about aligning, we talked a lot about taking advantage of the capabilities and the methodology. What does it mean? Fundamentally, what do I need to make sure that I do from tomorrow onwards if I'm an organisation looking to implement service ops?
Yeah, where do you start? So I'm always a fan of sort of starting at the end and working backwards. There's a lot of jargon, there's a lot of acronyms, there's a lot of elements of the platform as well that all play a part in this. But, initially put that to one side for 2 seconds and actually just look at, do I know what my services are and how we deliver them and what they're made up of? Draw them on a piece of paper, draw them in a PowerPoint, a Visio, crayon, doesn't really matter. But get that sense of what that, your stack looks like, for want of a better phrase. And then once you've got that, actually then you can start to take that and disseminate it back into the platform. So which areas of the platform from a capability point of view do we use for these little elements as well? And so you've got your services, you've got your applications, etc. And then you get down to your, the brass tacks, if you like, the servers that do the stuff. So the stuff that actually physically makes things work. Okay, have we got them in the platform? Have they got an owner, to your point earlier before? Who supports it? Have we got the right monitoring on it? But we've started at the top. So draw out your services and start small.
And none of this stuff has to be put into the platform, millions of pounds worth of projects.
No.
This is drawing it on a whiteboard.
Absolutely. And typically we've been around this game quite a long time. And the goal has always been to try and get the CMDB as the singing, all dancing answer to the world. And it always has been for the past 20 years. And that's not going to change. The problem you've got is sometimes, though, in a lot of organizations, it's seen as a massive barrier because it's such a big beast. You turn on some discovery for networks and you're up to 20 million CIs. It's huge. It's mammoth. What you've got to try and do is detract from that a little bit and go, no, you can start smaller. So what we're encouraging people to do, and certainly one of our customers, as you know, Jack, at the moment, it was like, ignore the model bit and we can talk to you about it, how it works, ignore that. Just go draw it out for us. Draw out so you understand what your lines of business are and what the services are, and then we'll work backwards. So once you've got that piece, pick 1 or 2 very simple ones that you potentially control yourself. So when I've done, a large part of this potentially used to be service mapping. When we did that at my previous company, we started with something that I controlled. So I used to run all the tooling as well. So I control it. So we'll just do it on one. We'll do one example because I know where all the bits are and who supports all the bits and how they all hang together. So I know that bit. So I'll just draw that bit. Started off with that, proved the methodology, we made some mistakes, etc., etc. But then you had a blueprint. Okay, cool. Now what does that mean for the platform? So did I have the data in the platform? How am I getting the data into the platform? Have I got the alerting, etc.? But all that's secondary.
And Chris touched on this earlier, but did you use that visibility of that particular service or the services in your area to then address that challenge, which I think many people have, of getting that senior leadership buy-in.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's a natural aversion to digging up the foundations of the house when you could be replacing the windows, right, with AI and automation and stuff like that. So did that help?
It massively helped. And again, it was given that visualization. It was given there you go. Oh, by the way, I can get someone to press a button there and that will go red and that will tell you. And he was like, okay, yeah, I'm sold. It works. It's one of the, it's very, a lot of this around events and service management for years, it's very intangible because when it's working, nothing ever happens. And that's what you want. And so sometimes you get them, well, why am I going to invest in the time and effort from even just manpower of resource to actually make this work? And you only really want, it only really comes to the forefront when something falls. Your Twitter example earlier, Jack, was ideal. You know, I'm pretty sure now there's probably a program in that organization to make sure that never happens again.
Absolutely.
So suddenly funding's available to go and do it, and new products and new licensing, et cetera, because tangibly there was a mistake, you know, and we need to fix it. And so it is very relatively intangible. But yeah, build something out small. We showed the IT director and said, look, it works. This is what it works. This is what we need. And we'll start small. I'm not going to boil the ocean. And they were absolutely all for it. Once you get the visibility, you get the buy-in, and then you get the support. And once you've got the support, that's when you can start to build them out from a strategy and a roadmap point of view of doing all the lower level elements as well. And naturally, by doing that, you get that alignment. And so actually you get to service ops as an outcome purely by sort of going backwards, if you like.
I think one of the things to also think about as well is that, you know, there's lots of talk around, again, AI, and, you know, CEOs going, okay, what do we need to do? How do we deploy it and so on? Actually, there's going to be many organizations found out very quickly because actually they haven't got some of these kind of foundational things in place, right? And there's going to be a lot of building quickly to get them to a place where they can actually start to, you know, benefit from those things. And I think that, again, that's a good example of where we've had amazing uptake on the Gen AI piece and AI as a general capability, but that's because we've seen good maturity from customers. Not even necessarily in terms of what they've managed to deploy, but just even thinking in the right way, right, and going about it in the right way is actually giving them an opportunity to benefit from that opportunity, you know, now, as opposed to having to wait 18 months. And in this world right now, 18 months could be a long time, right? So,
absolutely too long. And just to go back to your, you know, when, not to say it too much again, but we, you know, when we deflected 98% of first-time fix, but the reason for that was because all of the foundation stuff behind it was all there. The VA bit was the nice bit that on top of it that gave you the gateway into it, but actually they had a phenomenal knowledge base. They knew everything in the back end sort of thing. And that's why it worked, because they had that foundation. And the AI piece and the Gen AI will be exactly the same. If you've got that foundation, it will make it sing.
But they didn't have that across the whole organization, I think it's fair to say.
And then you start, so it works and then
did
you
exactly what you said.
Out.
And they started with one very specific desk, one very specific set of users. I mean, they were a big organization, so it was a big set of users, but they started in that area so as not to slow them down, so as to prove the concept worked, and so as to make sure that if that area, to test it, that area did work, they could roll it out to the rest of the organization. And I think that's really powerful. This stuff isn't, we've talked a lot about foundation, we've talked a lot about adoption, alignment and everything today, but this does not have to slow you down. If anything, it's the opposite. And there is low-hanging fruit from an automation perspective that you can do whilst you're putting these foundations in place.
And I think that, you know, we're opening up a conversation, you know, with a partner, you know, and actually saying, okay, we want to get started. What do we do, right? And actually just starting from that place in terms of what is the low-hanging fruit? What are the simple use cases that we can make inroads on now that will snowball into something later on, as opposed to looking at it going, wow, that's big, we'll go and do something else for now, and thinking that it's just going to disappear because it's not
absolutely.
right. So I think accepting that there is an opportunity now and then doing what you can to start that process is really key, I think.
And I think to that point, that's kind of the last major challenge we're seeing from some clients is, all right, I'm sold. I know we need to do this stuff, and I have done for a few years most of the time. But one, where are we now on that journey? I don't know. I can't see it. It's very complicated. There's a lot of acronyms. And two, how do we get to that next step? Where are we aiming, and how do we get to that next step? And I think until this kind of consolidation of the methodology and the concept, there hasn't necessarily been a clear roadmap, a clear maturity scale that combines the ITSM and ITOM. Both of them have had amazing individual roadmaps, but the combination of the two into that service operations roadmap and that maturity scale hasn't necessarily been there. And I think that very much exists now. We've in the meantime, we've kind of developed our own on the consultancy side, and we use that with clients. But there are those assets available now, and I think the assets are the assets. I think the fundamental piece is understanding where you are on that journey now, understanding where you're aiming, and then understanding how to get to that next step. And that, I think, removes that too big, too complicated, removes that perception of senior leaders that this is going to be millions of pounds and years worth of work. And not seeing a lot of ROI from it, because it's the complete opposite.
I suppose, like anything, it's very hard to see what that journey is going to look like unless you've got a roadmap, right? Just at the very simple place. It doesn't matter where you are, right? It could be nowhere. But if you know then what your roadmap consists of in order to get to the end position, then you've got a plan, right? And you can start to form a strategy.
And yes, there's a level of uniqueness for every organization, obviously, but the fundamentals are the same. Which is why this both our experiences with other clients in many different industries and whatever is really helpful, and we often introduce clients to each other that are on this journey. But it's also the ability for us to distill this into a clear maturity journey with clear steps is relatively simple in that those fundamentals are aligned across organizations and across industries. Okay. Good chat. Appreciate both your perspectives. As always, we've covered a lot of content today, and we've got tons more episodes coming up where we're going to dive into each of these areas. We're going to dive into where certain customers are on that journey and how specifically they can take advantage of certain capabilities within service ops. We're going to talk about new features that are not even public yet. We're going to talk and debate a lot more about the order in which you should do these things, which is really exciting. And we're starting actually with a live Q&A, a service operations Q&A next month that we're really looking forward to. So I shall see you both there.
Brilliant.
Brilliant. No, it's been really
Cheers,
good.
guys.
Thank you very much.